Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So let me first tell you, Dimitrios have this habit that he will say, I give this high-level opening remarks, and all the hard work then will be done by the colleagues. But he also taught me one simple thing that dream big. And dreams are different for different nationalities. Americans like to dream differently, and Indians like to dream differently. American dream is like Mark Zuckerberg, a college dropout and then becoming a billionaire. American dream is, my parents told me that you dream for a helicopter, but you get definitely a scooter. So that's where I'm coming from. Um, as Dimitrios mentioned, there has been a lot of work done on solar and wind. Uh, Whereas in terms of storage, we are still beginning to do up. So it is where the dreams need to bring reality. I'll tell you one small story before I dig into some numbers. 15 years back, I don't know how many of you were still in the renewable energy business in India. I'm sure Dr. Mathur and Dimitrios were there 15 years back. Uh, Clinton Foundation came to India and they said, we will do 3 gigawatts of solar parks in India. Everybody thought they are mad. And I was part of the Clinton Foundation. They dreamt of 3 gigawatt, but it resulted into 300 megawatt in Charanka Solar Park. That was the first time somebody thought of solar parks big globally and then in India. But that dream finally resulted into Bhadla Solar Park, which is now between 3 to 5 gigawatts. And I'm telling you, 15 years back, I was standing on one of the sand dunes in thousands of hectares in Bhadla Solar Park, which now is a beautiful tourist spot. You need a helicopter to see the whole Bhadla Solar Park over there. But what happened after that? In Gujarat and Rajasthan, as we know, tens of gigawatts of solar and wind has been installed. We are very well aware of that because they have deserts and they have a lot of good transmission connectivity with Delhi and other demand centers. How much storage do we have in Rajasthan and Gujarat, and for that matter, in India as a whole today? Very little. It's 0.05 gigawatts. So as Dimitrios mentioned, storage is beginning to happen, but slowly. This is where we need a lot of effort to come in. Again, my friend Abhishek told me a small story that a few months back, a cloud came in Rajasthan, of course, and 4 gigawatts of renewables went down within milliseconds. And POSOCO has to run left, right, and center to manage that 4 gigawatts because we didn't have storage. This is not the case of India. This is happening globally, including in the Western world, where we have passionately installed renewables, but we are a little bit delayed in installing the firm storage who can match the infirm power. So we are here today to discuss some of the structures which World Bank Group is working on, and something also in partnership with International Solar Alliance, to create bankable structures for storage which can help install renewable energy more and more. So I've divided my presentation into 4 different parts. What are we doing currently in World Bank and globally? What are we thinking what will happen in storage, and what are the ground realities, and what is the structure on which World Bank Group is working on? I'll begin from where Dimitrios left. This figure is wrong. We have now mobilized $850 million on global financing for battery storage. And we have committed 5.5 gigawatt hours, and we are in pipeline, we have 3.7 gigawatt hours. Now, again, my boss Dimitrios is very conservative, but we are probably one of the largest lenders for battery storage globally in battery storage, and many more lenders globally are now following these footsteps. Again, 6 to 9 months back, Dimitrios asked us, the World Bank Group, to work on hybrid PPAs. He said this is one thing which our clients need, the World Bank staff need. How do we structure bankable PPAs which can be adopted by developing countries? And he said the first step is to analyze the thermal projects. I was surprised. Why do I go and dig into coal PPAs? Coal is something we don't touch. But he said once you understand what the governments are already doing, what utilities are already doing in terms of gas and coal, then only you will be able to understand what are the parameters you need to put in a PPA so that they can transition easily from thermal to hybrid to solar plus storage. So these are a few parameters or differences between thermal and hybrid PPAs. Of course, we know the capital costs in thermal are lower. Now, hybrid projects are competing with that, but still capital costs are lower. In thermal PPAs, we have a more predictable output in terms of electrons, stable and consistent energy output, high dispatchability and reality. Now this factor is a little bit overhyped. As we know, both diesel and coal plants work efficiently between 60 to 70%. If it is higher or lower than that, the efficiency of fossil fuel thermal plants goes down. So dispatchability and reliability of thermal plants is also a little bit overhyped, and we have seen in the recent Ukraine war with the fuel becoming more and more unpredictable what impact it can have on the gas prices in Europe. On hybrid PPAs, the costs are higher, especially when it comes to storage. Dimitrios just gave new low-cost numbers for storage. I don't know if we can quote them or not, but yeah, these are the new numbers from China. Reduce environmental impact without any minimum load requirements. A VRE plant can operate. Solar and storage can operate without any minimum load requirements. Quick startup time, and they can help us in combating the duck curve. Now, this is the bulk of the report which we have been working on. So please pay attention. This is a 4-phase framework for structuring and planning a hybrid project. Step number 1. Now, this is overall system planning. We are not going to a hybrid project. First, we want to understand what the existing system in a country is doing. For example, in India, we have almost a 500 gigawatt system, and mostly it's coal, and more, almost 100 gigawatts of solar and wind is coming. So we have to look at least cost planning methods. We have to look at demands and needs method for a particular country before we come and jump to a hybrid project. Then we have to see what is the potential of solar and battery energy storage. There are many examples. For example, in case of Maldives, we found that solar is very important, but it has to be backed immediately by battery storage. Whereas in India, still after having 100 gigawatts of renewables, we are surviving without much storage. So every country and every state has its own needs, which has to be understood in detail before we move on to step number 2. Now, this is where we start looking at how a hybrid project will look like, at what location it is. A hybrid projects in Chhattisgarh, where World Bank is financing Solar Energy Corporation of India for the first hybrid project of solar, wind, and storage, is completely different from how you will design a plant in Rajasthan, or for that matter in Gujarat. For example, in Chhattisgarh, what we are doing is the 120 megawatt hour of storage, which is being put in addition to solar and wind, is going to displace a thermal plant in the evening. So it's a typical case of arbitrage where a peaking power plant in the evening is able to be displaced by a storage which is relatively still expensive, but it is able to compete easily with the thermal plant in the evening. It is completely different from Rajasthan and Gujarat, where you need also ancillary services, because the quantum of solar and wind installed over here is so high that the first requirement over here is frequency and voltage control. So that's why I mentioned location, type, size, use cases, and supply requirements for a particular country, or for that matter, for a particular state in a large country like India, is very important before you start designing a hybrid project. Then the next question which comes to us is whether you are looking at more dispatchability or firmness. Yes, we all want to have both the things at the same time, but there is pros and cons of having more dispatchability or more firmness. So this is something, a trade-off which we need to do. Again, time, variant use of energy. We are very well aware of the SECI tender in India, which has off-peak and peak power, which went very well. And we are also seeing globally that the arbitrage cases is the main business use case for storage technologies. So these are some of the initial parameters we should take into account before designing a hybrid project. Let's go to step number 3. Now, this is where different business models of storage and battery with solar and wind will come up. One of the reasons storage has been struggling, and we have to accept the fact that storage has been struggling, because unlike thermal and unlike renewable energy, storage does not generate anything. It does not generate electrons. It only stores, and it also stores with a degrading factor of 95%. So by default, storage does not have a monetization business model. we have to combine it with either renewables or sometimes also with diesel to make sure it has a business model where you're able to make money. So in the coming slides, we will discuss 5 business models where storage can be monetized with different things. Finally, once you have selected the business model, how do we implement it? So in the report which we are coming up, we have discussed different procurement models which can be used for selecting and procuring battery storage. But more importantly, in the last step, if you have seen, we will be also coming up with a hybrid template PPA. Now this is one thing one of the IPP players in India was telling me. What is happening in India and globally is that every utility or every company is trying to negotiate their own PPA for a hybrid project. For solar and wind, it's a little bit more straightforward, but when it comes to storage, it becomes very complex. PPAs are not standardized. So this is one thing, again, with the hybrid PPA framework, we will be disclosing a template PPA. Please note, this is a template PPA. You need to customize it and improvise it as per your own needs. But this will have at least 60 to 70% of the features which you need to develop a bankable PPA. After this, you can hire a law firm, a legal firm, and customize this PPA as per your own needs. So this is a complete package in these 4 phases which we are trying to come up in the next couple of months. Now, how are we able to come up this 4-phase PPA? What knowledge do we have? Again, as Dimitrios mentioned, we have significant investments both in terms of gigawatt hours and in terms of millions of dollars. As you can see, we are all over the place where we have active projects. The projects could be as small as 40 megawatt hours in Maldives, or a $1 billion program on battery storage, which we are coming up in India. So we have small to big projects globally in Africa and Latin America on storage. In this particular report, we have analyzed 53 use cases, both which World Bank Group has financed and also outside. And all these 57 use cases has been standardized in a template in this report, which will be disclosed. Now, to be frank, I'm not a storage expert, but the knowledge which we drive is from these 50 partners which are part of the energy storage partnership. As you can see, we have think tanks, we have manufacturers, we have labs like NREL who have storage experts. So we learn from them what is currently happening on the ground and what we need to do so that we can make our financing much more conducive to what is required by a particular country. So another thing which Dimitrios asked me 6 to 9 months back, let's analyze where we have invested $850 million and 5.5 gigawatt hours. Let's do a deep dive and try to understand where this money is going and where this storage is coming. Now, this is a very interesting slide. In 2022, energy shifting, the arbitrage is 53%. Next year, it is going to be 63%. By 2030, it will come back to 60%. So arbitrage energy shifting, peak and off-peak power remains the core and the backbone of the battery storage globally. The reason is very simple. In the evening, the tariffs are very high, and there is a peak power, so we are able to easily displace by using solar electrons in a battery storage in the afternoon. So this is the model which is making more business sense globally, and that's why it's much more prevalent. Behind the meter is mostly in developed countries like California and Germany, where you have rooftop and households are installing more and more storage. It's not happening currently in developing countries like India. Ancillary services, again, becoming more and more prevalent because, as I mentioned, even in countries like India, where more and more renewables is there, but for frequency and voltage control, we need to have battery storage to have stabilize the grid. Even spinning reserve is becoming more popular for battery storage, and remaining is only 5%. So these are where the investments are going. But if you look at how step by step a battery storage is being installed, first the governments are installing it for ancillary services. Second, for arbitrage, and finally, as we have seen in India, more and more RTC and more projects are coming where long duration energy storage is required. And I see Julia is over here. She's going to speak more about long duration, which we believe is the future. As I mentioned, I was describing in the phase 3 how a technical director of a utility will select a particular business model. So if you see from top, we start from the initial assessment of the overall planning for a country. Then we go down to what is required for that particular country, whether you need dispatchable power, you need firmness, whether you're looking at time-based payment. These are the different parameters you need to decide one by one before you go to the 5 business models at the bottom. Now, connecting with what I initially mentioned. Now, these are the steps we have observed are happening globally, but this is not something we are recommending. I have to be very clear. What we have seen as a step number 1, governments are usually installing storage for ancillary services and mostly on EPC basis because utilities want to have a complete control over the storage to manage their grid because more and more solar and wind is coming up and they want to reduce curtailment and they also want to manage their grid. So we have many cases, but I'm just giving an example of Maldives. We also seen in India where POSOCO is now coming into play and they are getting more and more storage involved. Step number 2 is where arbitrage comes into play, and we have seen many governments are now procuring large-scale solar to manage the peak power in the evening. So very simple, you store solar in the afternoon and use in the evening. This is where the storage makes the most business case. And third, in India, we are trying everything. We are coming up with huge projects for ancillary services, for arbitrage, and also we are looking at other business models. And we are going pretty big in battery storage. This is the last slide. Again, a very dense slide, but I will spend few minutes. This is the backbone of the report, the 5 business model. We have categorized the 57 use cases in these 5 business models. Step number 1 is a single contract or a dual contract where solar can be, so both solar and storage can be based on capacity. And in step number 2, we have only a single contract where payment is made to solar and storage only on capacity. Step number 3, model number 3 is a blended PPA, which is very common in India, where you are paying on the units, on the electrons, on how much electrons you are generating. Model number 4 is time variant for off-peak and peak power, where the peak power is usually high, sometimes double than the off-peak power. And model number 5 is the best model, which is close to Julia's heart, the 24/7. We bought this term from the McKinsey LDS report, where you're looking at baseload power. You're trying to displace the thermal PPAs with the hybrid PPAs. There are efforts in these directions as well. In the island economies, especially because there the diesel is very expensive, there are business cases where you can directly go for 24/7 PPAs. So I will stop here with the next steps. Currently, where we are in terms of this framework, we have sent this to external peer reviewers, where we are getting a lot of comments for us to incorporate. Then we are looking at training and capacity building efforts, where we can help utilities to learn more about hybrid PPAs. We are already doing several projects, but we want to select pilot countries where this can be implemented. And we are looking at different partners like International Solar Alliance and GAP, with whom we will partner to take this discussion forward. Thank you very much.